The oldest records inside the Galactic Council were carved into living crystal long before humanity had ever learned to make fire. Those archives remembered stars that had been born and died, civilizations that had risen into unimaginable greatness before collapsing into dust, and wars so catastrophic that entire constellations still carried the scars. The Council had survived every crisis by remaining calm, calculating, and united. Nothing surprised them anymore. Or so they believed. Then, on a day that would later become known across the galaxy as the Silence Before Earth, every prediction, every doctrine, and every certainty unraveled at once. It began with something almost impossible to notice. One by one, deep space listening stations stopped receiving routine transmissions from Earth's outer colonies. Trade routes that had buzzed with civilian traffic only hours earlier became eerily quiet. Navigation beacons still pulsed faithfully through the darkness, but no ships answered their calls. Surveillance drones swept across the Sol system, reporting nothing except an unsettling stillness. Even the stars seemed strangely distant, their cold light reflecting across empty space like forgotten memories. Inside the towering council chamber, suspended above the shimmering core of the capital world, hundreds of representatives from every known species watched the incoming report scroll across holographic displays. Normally, such silence from a developing civilization would be dismissed as a communications malfunction. But Earth had never behaved predictably. Humanity possessed an unsettling habit of turning impossible situations into history-changing moments. They had survived planetary extinction events, rebuilt after global wars, and repeatedly transformed disasters into opportunities that no advanced civilization could explain. That reputation alone was enough to make the oldest diplomats shift uneasily in their seats. The chamber itself felt colder. Thousands of floating observation screens illuminated anxious faces in pale blue light. Mechanical attendants drifted soundlessly between towering columns, their polished shells reflecting streams of classified intelligence. No one spoke above a whisper. The usual political arguments had vanished, replaced by an oppressive anticipation that settled over the room like an approaching storm. Then the emergency alert arrived. Not a declaration of war. Not a plea for help. Just one impossible notification. All human transmissions have ceased. The words remained suspended in the air, motionless, while every translator in the chamber repeated the message in hundreds of languages. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The silence carried a strange weight, pressing against every heartbeat. An elderly counselor from one of the founding civilizations slowly leaned forward, his ancient eyes narrowing as forgotten memories surfaced. He had witnessed the collapse of empires spanning entire galaxies. He had negotiated peace between species that had slaughtered each other for centuries. Yet something about this silence awakened an instinct older than reason itself. Fear. Not because humanity had disappeared, but because humanity had chosen to. Beyond the Council's view, hidden in the endless darkness between planets, something immense had begun to move. Invisible fleets altered their trajectories without activating a single engine flare. Encrypted quantum networks awakened beneath the moon. Deep beneath Earth's oceans, machines that had slept for decades quietly powered on, their ancient reactors humming with controlled purpose. Across the solar system, countless lights faded, not from destruction, but by deliberate command. Humanity wasn't retreating. Humanity was preparing. And somewhere, beyond the reach of every council sensor, the first step of Earth's ruthless retaliation had already begun. The galaxy had spent generations mistaking human patience for weakness. Within the next few hours, every civilization would learn how catastrophic that misunderstanding truly was. To the civilizations of the Galactic Council, Earth was little more than an insignificant blue dot circling an ordinary yellow star on the forgotten edge of explored space. Their maps labeled the Sol system as a peripheral region, strategically useful only because it connected a handful of trade corridors. Human ambassadors were welcomed into the Council's towering halls with carefully rehearsed smiles, but behind closed doors they were dismissed as representatives of a young, emotional species that lacked the wisdom to shape galactic affairs. Earth received the smallest research grants, the most dangerous military assignments, and the least desirable diplomatic postings. Officially, humanity was considered an equal member. Unofficially, it was expected to know its place. Commander Elena Hayes had spent nearly 20 years watching that illusion unfold. Standing on the panoramic command deck of the battleship Resolute Dawn, she gazed through the immense transparent alloy viewport as the brilliant curve of Earth slowly rotated beneath her. Oceans shimmered like flowing sapphire beneath swirling white cloud systems, while thousands of orbital habitats sparkled around the planet like tiny stars. From this distance, the world looked peaceful, almost innocent, but Elena knew what existed beneath that calm surface. Preparation. Every insult the Council delivered had become another lesson. Every betrayal had become another blueprint. Every attempt to exploit humanity had quietly strengthened its resolve. The bridge around her hummed with disciplined efficiency. Officers monitored holographic star charts suspended in midair, while streams of quantum data flowed across transparent displays. Soft pulses of blue light reflected across polished metallic floors. Artificial gravity generators emitted a barely audible vibration beneath her boots, almost like the heartbeat of the ship itself. "Status report," Elena said calmly. "All civilian convoys have reached their designated sectors," replied Lieutenant Marcus Chen without looking away from his console. "No irregularities detected." She nodded. "Exactly as planned." Across the solar system, humanity continued living what appeared to be an ordinary existence. Cargo freighters transported supplies between Mars and Earth. Lunar mining colonies extracted rare isotopes. Families watched orbital sunsets from floating cities above the clouds. Scientists published harmless research papers discussing clean energy, medical breakthroughs, and terraforming technologies. The galaxy saw progress. It never saw the truth. Far beneath the scarred surface of Earth's moon, hidden behind kilometers of reinforced titanium rock and naturally occurring radiation fields, enormous facilities stretched deeper than any alien survey had ever penetrated. Official records described the region as abandoned mining infrastructure left over from humanity's earliest expansion into space. It was a lie. Inside those subterranean chambers, thousands of engineers, physicists, and military specialists worked in complete secrecy. Entire generations had dedicated their lives to projects whose names never appeared in government databases. Massive gravitational reactors pulsed with restrained energy. Quantum fabrication arrays assembled machines unlike anything found in Council technology. Artificial intelligences processed equations that conventional science declared impossible. No applause. No recognition. Only relentless determination. Elena had walked through those silent corridors years earlier. She still remembered the feeling. There had been no speeches celebrating power. No banners proclaiming dominance. Only exhausted scientists surrounded by endless calculations, quietly preparing for a future they prayed would never arrive. "We're building this," one elderly engineer had told her, his voice barely above a whisper, because history says peace only survives when someone is capable of defending it. Those words had never left her. Now, as the Resolute Dawn drifted above the cradle of humanity, Elena looked toward the moon hanging silently beyond Earth's orbit. To everyone else, it was a lifeless sphere of dust and craters. To her, it was humanity's greatest secret. A promise buried beneath stone. A shield forged from patience rather than pride. She took a slow breath before turning back toward her crew. The Council still believed humanity spent its resources trying to earn acceptance. They couldn't have been more wrong. While diplomats argued beneath glittering chandeliers light years away, Earth had spent decades preparing for the one lesson history repeated without mercy, that the universe often rewarded strength far more readily than kindness. And if that lesson was ever tested, humanity intended to make absolutely certain it would be the last mistake its enemies would ever make. The breaking point arrived without warning, and without mercy. For weeks, rumors had rippled through the Galactic Council like invisible currents. A classified logistics network had been crippled near the Orion Transit Gate, cutting off vital supplies to several frontier fleets. Before investigators could even begin tracing the sabotage, accusations found their target. Every fabricated data trail, every falsified quantum signature, every manipulated surveillance recording pointed toward one convenient culprit: Earth. Human ambassadors demanded an independent investigation. They submitted navigation logs, sensor records, and encrypted communications proving that no human vessel had entered the restricted sector. Their evidence was ignored before it was even reviewed. Behind polished council tables and beneath vaulted crystal domes, political convenience triumphed over truth. The vote took less than 4 minutes. The sentence would scar generations. The Sol system has violated interstellar security protocols, the High Council declared in a voice stripped of emotion. Punitive action is hereby authorized. No appeals. No negotiations. No second chances. Across the galaxy, military relays awakened like predators opening their eyes. The mighty fleets of the Carthan Dominion, accompanied by coalition warships flying the Council's authority, accelerated toward humanity's colonies. Their engines burned with blinding streams of violet plasma, illuminating the darkness between worlds as thousands of vessels formed an armada so vast it eclipsed nearby moons. On Mars, dawn had barely touched the horizon when orbital alarms shattered the morning silence. Children stopped running through the glass-covered parks of New Olympus. Factory workers looked toward the crimson sky as emergency sirens echoed across the domed cities. Families gathered near observation windows, hoping the approaching ships had come for diplomacy. Instead, the heavens opened. The first kinetic strike entered the atmosphere without a sound. Then came the impact. An entire industrial district disappeared beneath a wall of white light that swallowed steel towers, transit lines, and residential blocks in a single blinding heartbeat. The shockwave rolled across the Martian plains like an angry ocean, shattering transparent domes and throwing emergency vehicles through the air. Dust storms erupted instantly, turning daylight into a suffocating crimson nightmare. Farther out, Europa Station received only 8 seconds of warning. Scientists barely had time to lock down laboratory doors before concentrated plasma lances pierced the ice-covered habitat. Frozen oceans erupted into towering geysers as entire research sectors collapsed into the abyss below. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, trapping hundreds inside compartments that slowly lost heat and oxygen. Across dozens of colonies, the same tragedy unfolded. Not military bases. Not weapons facilities. Homes. Hospitals. Schools. Commander Elena Hayes stood motionless aboard the Resolute Dawn, her knuckles widening against the edge of the tactical console as live feeds flooded the bridge. A medic carrying an unconscious child through burning corridors. A firefighter disappearing beneath collapsing debris. A father pounding helplessly against a sealed evacuation hatch as explosions consumed the platform beyond. One transmission after another dissolved into static. Please, if anyone can hear us. We're losing atmosphere. Tell my wife. Silence. The bridge crew said nothing. They couldn't. Even seasoned officers who had survived decades of combat stared at the holographic displays with hollow eyes, unable to comprehend the scale of the destruction unfolding across humanity's frontier. Elena closed her eyes for only a moment. Every desperate voice etched itself into her memory. Every face became a promise. The Council believed fear would force Earth to surrender. Instead, it united billions with a single, unbreakable purpose. Within hours, civilian evacuation routes vanished from galactic tracking networks. Human cargo ships changed course without broadcasting destinations. Military fleets powered down every visible signature before slipping into the darkness between the stars. Orbital stations went silent. Communication arrays shut down one by one until the Sol system itself seemed to disappear from the galaxy's awareness. To the Council, it looked like defeat. To humanity, it was the calm before the storm. Because somewhere beneath the moon, hidden beyond every enemy scanner, ancient reactors surged to full power for the first time in decades. Deep inside vaults carved into solid stone, machines that had never been tested outside simulation awakened with a low, resonant hum. Earth had absorbed the first blow. Now it was preparing to answer. And when humanity finally struck back, the galaxy would realize that it had not attacked a fragile young civilization. It had awakened one that had spent decades preparing for exactly this moment. The Galactic Council expected to witness the final collapse of humanity. Instead, they sailed directly into the greatest deception ever engineered by a civilization. Nearly 3 weeks after the devastating assault on Earth's colonies, the combined Council armada crossed the outer boundary of the Sol system. Thousands of warships advanced in flawless formation, stretching across millions of kilometers like a river of polished steel flowing through the darkness. Their commanders anticipated desperate resistance, minefields, orbital defenses, or perhaps a last stand around Earth itself. Tactical simulations predicted heavy losses, but every outcome ended with humanity's unconditional surrender. None of those simulations accounted for silence. The first thing they noticed was the emptiness. The massive defense platforms orbiting Neptune had been abandoned. Automated sentry satellites drifted lifelessly through space. The military shipyards around Jupiter showed no signs of activity. Even Earth's orbital fleet, the pride of humanity's navy, had vanished without leaving behind a single engine signature. No contacts. The words echoed across command bridges throughout the invading armada. No thermal emissions. No active targeting systems. No communications. Nothing. An uneasy tension spread through the fleet. Veteran admirals exchanged uncertain glances. Every instinct forged through centuries of warfare warned them that an undefended battlefield was often the most dangerous kind. Still, confidence prevailed. The flagship Dominion's wrath accelerated toward the inner solar system, followed by thousands of escorts. Gigantic fusion engines illuminated nearby asteroids with waves of blue-white fire as the fleet crossed an invisible point just beyond the orbit of Mars. Then, reality changed. Without warning, every navigation display erupted into cascading errors. Gravity alarms screamed. Artificial horizons spun wildly. Entire star charts twisted into impossible geometries as space itself seemed to ripple like the surface of disturbed water. "What is happening?" shouted one bridge officer. No one answered. Outside the viewport, an escort cruiser simply stopped. Not because its engines failed. Not because it had been struck. The ship froze in place as though an invisible hand had seized it. Moments later, another destroyer began rotating without firing maneuvering thrusters, spinning slowly until its own structural frame tore apart under impossible gravitational stress. Fragments drifted silently into the void, glowing faintly before vanishing into tiny points of darkness no larger than grains of sand. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Entire squadrons attempted emergency retreats, only to discover their faster-than-light drives refused to activate. Plasma cannons powered up, but the energy collapsed inward before reaching their emitters. Missile launch systems locked themselves as targeting computers reported mathematical impossibilities. The laws of physics were no longer behaving. Deep beneath the lunar surface, inside chambers hidden for generations beneath kilometers of reinforced rock, countless reactors roared to life in perfect synchronization. Their combined energy flowed through an immense lattice stretching invisibly across the solar system, a network humanity had spent decades constructing in complete secrecy. The Aegis Network. It had never been designed to destroy fleets. It had been built to command gravity itself. Commander Elena Hayes stood inside the central control chamber, surrounded by towering rings of rotating quantum processors. Streams of luminous equations spiraled through the air as the artificial intelligence at the heart of Aegis calculated billions of gravitational interactions every second. The room vibrated with restrained power, yet Elena remained perfectly still. She remembered every colony that had burned. Every innocent life erased. Every diplomatic plea the Council had ignored. This wasn't revenge born of hatred. It was justice built through patience. Synchronization complete, the AI announced calmly. Across the solar system, invisible gravitational nodes awakened one after another, bending spacetime with astonishing precision. Entire enemy formations found themselves trapped inside carefully engineered curvature fields. Ships attempting to flee unknowingly accelerated deeper into invisible prisons. Weapons designed to annihilate planets became useless collections of silent machinery. Not a single human missile had been fired. Not a single conventional battle had begun. Humanity hadn't developed a stronger fleet. Humanity had rewritten the battlefield itself. Back aboard the Dominion's Wrath, terror replaced arrogance as senior commanders watched their overwhelming military power reduced to helpless spectators. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the strongest armada in existence realized it was no longer fighting an enemy. It was fighting the very fabric of the universe. And humanity had learned how to command it. The command chamber fell into absolute silence. Every eye turned toward Commander Elena Hayes as billions of calculations streamed across the holographic sphere surrounding her. Outside, the Aegis network held the largest invasion fleet in galactic history suspended inside a web of controlled gravity. Thousands of enemy warships drifted helplessly through distorted space, their engines screaming against forces they could neither measure nor escape. Humanity had seized complete control of the battlefield. Now came the decision that would define its future. Elena's fingers rested lightly on the command console. One gesture was all it would take. The Aegis network could collapse every artificial gravity well at once, crushing entire fleets into fragments before a single distress signal escaped the solar system. No one would blame her. Not after Mars. Not after Europa. Not after the millions of innocent lives reduced to ash because politicians had chosen pride over justice. For a long moment, she closed her eyes. The voices of the lost echoed in her memory, not as cries for vengeance, but as reminders of everything humanity had once hoped the galaxy could become. When she opened her eyes again, her expression had hardened into quiet resolve. Execute Protocol Echo. The artificial intelligence acknowledged instantly. Confirmed. Across the solar system, the impossible began. Instead of destroying the trapped armada, the Aegis network redirected every hostile action back toward its source. Missiles that had remained armed inside launch tubes quietly reversed their targeting matrices. Planet-killer railgun projectiles, already accelerated toward Earth, bent through graceful arcs across distorted spacetime before racing back toward the warships that had fired them. Plasma lances folded harmlessly around civilian habitats while converging on empty military staging zones. Every attack became its own consequence. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability written into the laws of physics. At that same moment, humanity's hidden fleet finally revealed itself. Without warning, dozens of gravitational corridors shimmered into existence around the trapped invasion force. From those glowing fractures emerged sleek human warships unlike anything the Council had ever documented. They didn't roar into battle with overwhelming firepower. They moved with eerie precision, slipping silently through curved space where conventional sensors could barely perceive them. The resolute Dawn led the formation. Its dark hull reflected the distant sunlight like polished obsidian as fighter squadrons launched from concealed bays. Swarms of autonomous drones flowed around the fleet in coordinated formations, weaving intricate patterns before separating toward strategic objectives. Every movement had purpose. Communication arrays were disabled. Command ships lost propulsion. Shield generators shut down. Weapons vanished from tactical displays one by one. Humanity wasn't fighting to annihilate its enemies. It was dismantling their ability to continue the war. A desperate Carthan admiral, refusing to accept defeat, activated the Dominion's final contingency, a stellar annihilation weapon hidden inside the flagship's armored core. Its reactor surged with enough energy to ignite a chain reaction capable of sterilizing every inhabited world in the solar system. Warning sirens echoed across every human vessel. The AI calculated millions of outcomes. Probability of planetary survival. Rapidly approaching zero. Elena stared at the tactical display. There was only one solution. Only one ship close enough. Without hesitation, she issued her final command. Bring the Resolute Dawn into synchronization. Her bridge crew understood immediately. No one protested. No one hesitated. The battleship accelerated directly toward the unstable flagship as gravitational currents twisted around both vessels. Every warning alarm merged into a deafening chorus while the quantum core beneath the ship reached critical resonance. Outside, stars themselves seemed to bend. The Resolute Dawn became the heart of the Aegis network. Then, light. Not the violent flash of destruction, but a brilliant wave of shimmering energy that spread across the battlefield like dawn breaking over an endless ocean. When the brilliance faded, the Carthan superweapon was gone. Its reactors had been stripped of the very physical conditions required to function. Across the trapped fleet, every planet killer, every mass driver, every stellar bomb suffered the same fate. Their destructive potential simply ceased to exist. The technology still remained. The ability to wage total war did not. As the surviving enemy crew stared in stunned disbelief, a realization spread from one bridge to another. Humanity could have exterminated them. Instead, it had permanently ended the era of extinction weapons. In choosing restraint over revenge, Earth achieved something no empire, no alliance, and no council in history had ever accomplished. It didn't merely win the battle. It transformed the future of the galaxy. The war ended not with another explosion, but with silence. It spread across the galaxy more quickly than any fleet could travel. Military command networks stopped transmitting attack orders. Border fortresses powered down their planetary cannons. Long-contested sectors that had echoed with the sound of war for centuries suddenly fell still, as though the stars themselves were pausing to witness history being rewritten. Inside the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, the atmosphere was unlike anything recorded in 10,000 years. The circular hall, once filled with endless debate and political arrogance, now stood frozen beneath the soft glow of towering crystal pillars. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations occupied their elevated platforms, yet no one argued. No one demanded retaliation. The usual chorus of translators, advisors, and military strategists had vanished into complete, almost uncomfortable silence. Every eye remained fixed on the enormous holographic display suspended above the chamber. It showed Earth. Not burning. Not celebrating. Simply turning beneath the light of its sun. Blue oceans shimmered beneath drifting clouds. Green continents stretched peacefully across the globe. Orbital reconstruction platforms circled the planet, repairing damaged habitats with quiet determination. Rescue vessels still traveled between Mars, Europa, and the scattered colonies, carrying survivors home instead of soldiers into battle. A civilization that had every reason to seek vengeance had chosen to rebuild. The image changed. Commander Elena Hayes appeared on the projection. She stood inside a modest communications room rather than a military command center. Behind her, there were no banners proclaiming victory, no captured enemy flags, and no cheering crowds. Only a wide observation window looking out toward the Earth she had nearly sacrificed everything to protect. Her uniform still carried the scars of battle. Her face carried something heavier. Loss. She looked directly into the Council's cameras, and for several long seconds she said nothing. The silence itself became part of the message. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, steady, and unmistakably human. You believed compassion made us weak. Images of destroyed colonies quietly appeared beside her. Children's schools reduced to dust. Collapsed Martian cities. Frozen rescue crews on Europa. Faces of ordinary civilians whose lives had ended before history would ever remember their names. We remember every life that was taken. The images slowly faded. But we refused to become what we defeated. Throughout the chamber, veteran diplomats lowered their eyes. Military commanders who had once demanded Earth's punishment found themselves unable to meet the gaze of the woman on the screen. No accusation could have carried greater weight than her restraint. Elena continued. Humanity asks for no conquered worlds. We seek no tribute. We claim no throne. A brief pause followed. Then came the words that would be carved into monuments across thousands of planets for generations to come. Peace is the greatest achievement any civilization can earn. But peace without freedom is only surrender wearing a kinder face. No one applauded. No one interrupted. There was simply nothing left to argue. In the days that followed, impossible changes swept across known space. The Carthan Dominion dissolved its expansion fleets. Ancient rival species signed treaties that had been considered fantasy only weeks earlier. The Galactic Council unanimously abolished doctrines that justified collective punishment and established new protections for emerging civilizations, ensuring no young world would ever again suffer the injustice Earth had endured. And perhaps the greatest change of all. Humanity never occupied the seat of conqueror. Instead, it accepted a role no empire had ever deserved. Guardian. Not because it possessed the strongest fleet. Not because it controlled the most powerful technology. But because, when given absolute power over its enemies, it proved that strength meant far more than the ability to destroy. Years later, children from worlds separated by thousands of light years would study the day Earth changed the course of galactic history. They would learn that the greatest victory was not measured by the enemies defeated, but by the future preserved. And whenever new explorers looked toward the small blue planet at the edge of the spiral arm, they no longer saw the galaxy's youngest civilization. They saw the world that had taught the stars an unforgettable truth. Kindness is humanity's first choice. But when freedom is threatened, humanity's last answer is one the universe will never forget.